Hello everyone, Professor Berninger here. I just want to take you on a little trip with me to Concord, Massachusetts, which is to me the capital of 19th century American literature. And it's just a marvelous place. I've spent a fair amount of time there visiting the historic sites associated with Thoreau, Emerson, Hawthorne, Louisa May Alcott, among others. And we're going to talk a little bit about each one of them during this presentation. But first, a little bit about where I've been and what I've done as far as visiting homes of authors. So Columbia Green very kindly granted me a sabbatical in 2006, and the sabbatical means I did not have to really show up at work and teach, but I spent a semester improving myself, building a body of work to use in my teaching. And my sabbatical project, my particular one, was to visit historic homes of American authors all over the country. And I spent time out here in California and time in the Midwest, which was really terrific. This is the Mark Twain sites. We're going to talk more about those when we get around to Mark Twain later in the semester. But we are going to spend our time here today outside of Boston in Concord, Massachusetts. You can see here, circling again. And it is, people do commute into Boston from there. So it is a good spot for that. Here is a reproduction of Thoreau's Cabin, which is a little out of order in my slideshow, so we'll skip over that for now. But here's Boston, and Concord is somewhere up in here, and we have to take the Massachusetts Turnpike to get there. Now this is, most of you know, a really old picture because on the Mass Pike and in New York State, there aren't toll booths anymore. You just drive along and you pay your fees. I almost said fine. Pay your fees, just hit your credit card. You don't even know you're doing it. But we do have to get on the Mass Pike to get out to Concord, Massachusetts. Here's some slides of contemporary Concord, very historic place, very wealthy. A lot of wealthy people live there. There's a bicycle shop there that I visit once in a while, and I bet when last time I was there, they had $250,000 worth of bicycle frames in one room. They weren't even built up. There were plenty of built up bikes that were $10,000 a piece, but just bicycle frames. So very wealthy place, very historic for several reasons. There's another nice shot of Concord, another nice shot of Main Street. It's a pretty busy little town as well. Very nice, very nice. And of course, it is along the Lexington and Concord Road is where the American Revolution got started. And the first shots of the American Revolution were fired in Lexington. The first British casualties in the American Revolution was at this bridge, which is just outside the town. So it's a very historic bridge, and a few British soldiers were killed. A monument was erected there in 1875, the anniversary of it. It's a really, it gives me the shivers to be there. It's one of those very special places in American history where the revolution started, and that of course changed world history. Here's the grave of British soldiers, and they came 3,000 miles and died to keep the past upon its throne. Unheard beyond the ocean tide, their English mother made her moan. April 19, 1775. So that's the British soldiers who were killed there. And there's me contemplating life, death, and the American Revolution. And right over in this direction, really it's almost right there, is one, almost forgot about this. This is a Daniel Chester French statue. Daniel Chester French, he's a native of Concord, and he's one of America's absolute greatest sculptors. And he was around in the late 19th, early 20th century, and he did the Lincoln Memorial, and he also did this person leaving his coat on his plow and taking his rifle off. This is the Minuteman statue, very famous statue. The part of the interpretation of this area, which is the National Park Service operates, talks about two revolutions, the revolution in American literature and the American Revolution. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as the semester goes on. There's a place called the Old Manse, and this was actually owned by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who we're not studying, but we could have included them if we had another week. And he owned this, and he rented it out to our old buddy, Nathaniel Hawthorne. And in this window here is maybe the most romantic thing you can come across in a historic house museum. Hawthorne's wife, who he was very devoted to, and she to him, Sophia Peabody, she took her little diamond ring that he gave her and she carved their initials into the glass. And it is, of course, still there. So if you go and take a tour of the Old Manse, you can see that. This is one of my favorite things in Concord, if not my very favorite thing. So Thoreau and Hawthorne were pretty close friends when they were in Concord together. They went canoeing together on the Merrimack River and walked around together and hung out. And when Hawthorne got married, Thoreau, here's the best wedding gift ever, Thoreau gave him a vegetable garden. And they have recreated that vegetable garden there today with the same things that Thoreau would have planted for Hawthorne. So what a marvelous gift to give to someone, a vegetable garden. So Thoreau's gift to Hawthorne, the Hawthornes, Sophia and Nathaniel, a vegetable garden. And I managed to get back. So there's Nathaniel Hawthorne, very handsome man. That is a stunning portrait. That is in the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, and I've seen it, and it's really, really quite a marvelous portrait of Hawthorne. And there's Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was sort of the person who gathered a lot of these literary figures together, and he was the editor of a magazine and quite well off as well. And he was sort of Thoreau's mentor in a way, though they somewhat aggravated each other, but what do you expect? Here's Emerson's house, which you can visit. The Emerson family still owns it, and curiously, the Emerson family bans, they do not allow the tour guides to talk about Emerson's writing at all. They can only talk about the family. So it's one of the unusual things. Most historic sites don't have anything that they are not allowed to talk about, but the family actually precludes it there. This is another historic site called the Wayside, and this is where Hawthorne lived. He didn't. Hawthorne lived there. Louisa May Alcott lived there, and this is where she lived the events of Little Women. So the Little Women fans out there, I hope you saw the movie, what was it, last year? Marvelous movie adaptation of a marvelous book. Been many great movie adaptations of Little Women. This is the house where the Alcotts lived when Louisa May Alcott lived the events that were put into Little Women. There is an older picture of Hawthorne. That's how he would have looked when he lived at the Wayside. He was in Concord when he was young, and then he was there when he was much older. There's where Louisa May Alcott lived when she was writing the Little Women. So this is the house you can visit to learn all about Louisa May Alcott, and they give a very good tour there. There's Bronson Alcott, Louisa May Alcott's very eccentric father. He did have some great ideas about education. He had his own little school in Concord for a while, but he was a bit of a nut. The mother really kept the family together. He did not go to fight in the Civil War like in Little Women. He would not have been a good military man. Louisa May Alcott actually went and was a nurse in the Civil War, but in the book, she made her dad go. And there's Louisa May Alcott, author of Little Women and other very fine short stories. There's the Concord Museum, which is where Emerson's library is. They have a fake library in the house. And this is where Thoreau's survey chains are. Thoreau was a professional surveyor. That's how he made a living, among other things. His bed, his desk. It's really a very special museum of literature and American history. Very, very special museum in Concord, Massachusetts. I love Concord. If you can't tell, my favorite place in New England. And there's young Thoreau. There's older Thoreau with the beard. And he was a pretty eccentric, very unusual guy. There have been a few very good books written about him, actually several, and they all describe his eyes, and you can see his eyes here looking out at you. And he didn't blink a lot. He was always seeing things that other people didn't see. He was great at seeing arrowheads and anything in nature. And there he is with his full beard, and near the end of his life, he did die of tuberculosis. The house where he died just came up for sale. It's kind of interesting. I think it was 1.1 million. All right, now we're going to